Okay, so you know that feeling, right, when you get a medical bill in the mail and maybe it's something like an unexpected copay or something even bigger, and you start thinking, how am I going to deal with this?
Right.
But have you ever thought about what those bills could mean, like beyond just your bank account? Like, what could they mean for things like getting a mortgage later on or even hurting your credit score?
Yeah, it's a really important thing to think about. And for a long time, medical debt really could end up having a big impact on your financial future because lenders use that information to decide if you were a good risk.
Right. And that's what we're looking at today because things are actually changing. We're doing a deep dive on a new rule from the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And this was finalized just recently on January 7th, 2025.
Yeah, that's right. And we want to take this new rule and really break it down for you. So we're going to look at
Mhm.
what's changing, how things worked before, and most importantly, what it all means for you when it comes to medical bills and your credit report.
And to make sure we're giving you the best info, we're mainly using the official announcement that came straight from the CFPB. So let's go back to the beginning. What was the deal with medical bills and credit reports before this new rule came along?
Well, before this rule, medical bills were treated pretty much like any other kind of debt. They could show up on your credit report, and that meant lenders would look at them when deciding if they should give you a loan, like a mortgage or even a credit card.
And I guess you could say that makes sense for lenders at first glance.
Mhm.
They want to know if you're going to pay back what you owe. But the CFPB actually did some research and found something really interesting about medical debt specifically.
The really interesting thing is that the CFPB found medical debt isn't a great way to predict if someone's going to pay back other loans. Think about it. Like if you take out a loan to buy a new fridge, that's your choice. But medical debt often happens because of things you can't control, like if you get sick or there's an emergency. So it's not the best way to tell if you're responsible with your money overall.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not like anyone's planning on, needing emergency surgery and getting hit with all those costs. And this old system could really affect people, especially with something as big as buying a house.
Absolutely. The CFPB said that because of medical debt, thousands of mortgage applications were probably getting denied every year, even from people who were doing fine financially. And even if you weren't denied, it could still hurt your credit score and make it more expensive to borrow money in general.
And this wasn't just a small problem either. I think the
Mm.
CFPB announcement mentioned that it affected a lot of people.
You're right. Their estimate said that something like 15 million Americans had around $49 billion in medical bills on their credit reports. That's a huge number of people potentially facing financial problems just because of this.
It almost feels like there had to be some kind of exception made for this to happen,
Uh,
considering how much we focus on keeping health information private.
Yeah, you've got a point. There was this kind of special carve out in the federal regulations. Even though your medical history is generally protected, this exception let lenders look at medical debt. And this gave debt collectors a lot of power because they could use credit reporting to pressure people into paying medical bills, even if those bills were wrong or still being disputed.
Wow, that sounds super stressful. Having to deal with a medical problem and then fighting a bill that might not even be right, and on top of that, worrying about your credit being messed up.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've talked about the old situation. Now, what does this new rule from the CFPB actually do to change things?
Well, the main change is a big one. The new rule basically stops medical bills from being included on the credit reports that lenders use to make decisions. Plus, lenders aren't allowed to use any medical information when they're deciding about loans.
So it's getting rid of that special carve-out we talked about?
Exactly. And that's how we get to the two main things this rule is prohibiting. The CFPB is changing Regulation V, which is how the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or FCRA, is put into practice. They're focusing on this specific exception.
Okay, so what are those two prohibitions?
Hmm.
What are the concrete changes that are happening?
The first one is that lenders can't consider any medical information when they're making decisions about loans. So that regulatory carve-out we talked about is gone. And this isn't just about bills, it's any medical information. For example, a lender couldn't even say, hey, you have this medical device, so we could take that if you don't pay back your loan.
I see. So they can't even consider using something like a medical device as collateral for a loan.
Wow, that really shows how broad this change is. And what's the second thing?
The second thing is about the consumer reporting agencies. Those are the credit bureaus like Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Now, they can't include any medical debt information on the credit reports and credit scores they give to lenders.
So if I'm applying for a car loan or a mortgage, the lender won't even see if I have any outstanding medical bills. And they can't use any other medical info about me to make their decision.
Oh.
Right, that's the idea. The CFPB wants to protect people's privacy and stop the credit reporting system from being used to make people pay bills that they think are wrong or are still fighting about.
Sounds like a really positive step for consumers. What kind of good things does the CFPB think will happen because of this rule?
Well, they think it'll make a real difference. For example, they estimate that every year about 22,000 more people will be able to get affordable mortgages because of this rule. And that's because their research showed that a lot of mortgage applications were denied, at least partly because of medical debt on credit report.
Wow, 22,000 more families could buy homes. That's amazing. What about credit scores? Will this change affect people's scores too?
Yeah, they think it will. They're predicting that Americans who have medical debt on their credit reports now could see their scores go up by an average of 20 points. And that can make a big difference in the interest rates you get on loans and credit cards.
That's great news for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the credit reporting agencies themselves had already started to make changes in this area, hadn't they?
You're right. Before this rule was even finalized, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion all said they would stop putting certain medical debts on credit reports. Specifically, they were talking about collection accounts that were less than $500. And this came after the CFPB raised concerns about medical debt reporting back in 2022.
And FICO and Vantage Score, the companies that calculate credit scores, they were also making changes to their systems, right?
Exactly. They both said they were going to make medical bills less important when figuring out someone's credit score.
Yeah.
So this new rule is really building on what was already happening and making these changes a legal requirement for lenders.
You know, it's important to be clear about what this rule covers. Are there any situations where lenders are still allowed to look at medical information?
Yes, that's a really important point to understand. This rule doesn't mean lenders can never consider medical information. There are a few exceptions. For instance, they can still look at medical information if they need to confirm something like a medical-based forbearance. So like if you need to pause your mortgage payments for a bit because you're sick, then they can also verify medical expenses if you're taking out a loan specifically to cover those costs. And they can still consider certain benefits like disability payments as income when they're deciding about a loan application. The main thing is they can't use your past medical debt to say whether you'll be good at paying back other kinds of loans in the future.
Okay, that makes sense. They can't use your old medical debt as a reason to deny you a loan for something unrelated to medical expenses.
Yeah,
And the CFPB said this rule is part of a bigger effort. Can you tell us more about that?
definitely. This is part of the work the CFTV is doing to protect consumers from the problems that medical debt can cause and from what they see as unfair or aggressive ways that debt collectors try to get people to pay medical bills.
They've been pretty active on this issue, haven't they? I remember seeing something about guidance they gave about inaccurate medical debts.
Yes, that's right. Last October, the CFPB told debt collectors that it's against the law to try to collect on medical debts that are wrong or not legally valid. So they're making sure people don't have to pay bills that they don't actually owe.
And they did a lot of research and released reports about this problem before making this new rule, right?
That's correct. In 2022, the CFTB put out a report that showed how common and serious the impact of medical debt is on people's financial well-being. And they also issued a bulletin about the No Surprises Act, reminding credit reporting companies and debt collectors about what they have to do under that law, which is meant to protect patients from surprise out-of-network medical bills.
So this new rule is the latest in a bunch of things they've done to try to help people with the financial burden of medical debt. For those listening who are wondering when this will all actually start, what's the timeline?
The rule will go into effect 60 days after it's officially published in the Federal Register. So keep an eye out for that because that's when this big change will actually begin.
And for anyone who wants to dig deeper into this rule or learn more about what the CFPB is doing about medical debt, where can they go?
The best place is the CFPB website. You can find the full official text of the rule there. It's called Prohibition on Creditors and Consumer Reporting Agencies Concerning Medical Information, Regulation V. They also have something called a redline version, which isn't the official one, but it shows you exactly what changes they're making to the existing rules.
That redline version sounds helpful to see what's actually changing in the legal language.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on the CFPB website that would be good for people to check out?
Yeah, definitely look at their page on credit reporting requirements. That gives you a really good overview of your rights and protections when it comes to credit reporting. And then they also have a section specifically about their work on medical debt, which will give you even more details and context.
And if someone thinks they've been treated unfairly because of medical debt on their credit report, even before this new rule starts, is there anything they can do?
Absolutely. The CFPB wants people to tell them about any problems they're having with financial products or services, including things related to medical debt and credit reporting. You can do this on their website, consumerfinance.gov, or by calling them at 855-411-CFPB. That's 2372.
That's great info. It's good to know there's a way to speak up and report any problems. So to sum up our deep dive into this new CFPB rule, what's the main takeaway?
The big news is that soon medical bills won't be something lenders can use to decide about giving loans. And they won't be on the credit reports that lenders use. This is a huge change, and it could really help millions of Americans who are dealing with medical debt.
And for you, the listener, this could mean some really positive changes for your finances. It could make your credit score better, which means it'll be easier and less expensive to get credit when you need it. And it could open up opportunities like being able to get that mortgage you've been wanting without your past medical bills holding you back.
This is something for you to think about. How might this upcoming change affect your own financial planning and the way you handle healthcare costs? And even beyond this specific rule, it's always smart to stay updated on the things that are being done to protect consumers in the financial world. So maybe check out the CFPB website and other resources that focus on consumer financial protection. There's always more to learn.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.
See you next time.